Hi, everybody. Well, still learning how to master the technology of StreamYard. I have all these buttons and things in front of me, and some of my colleagues who have been a step more established than me, they have people that actually push the buttons for them. I'm John Silk, and welcome to Office Hours, a weekly feature for our members of Guiding Your Career community. This is an innovative approach to help you get access to the support and the education you need to really navigate a very, very chaotic job market. Let me tell you a little something about me. I have started off, I've been interviewing people all my life. I started off as a crime writer and moved into editing, and then finished my career at the Houston Post as a crime writer and investigative reporter. And it was a great experience because it taught me how to elicit information from people, many of whom did not want to talk. And I was very successful in that job and got a chance to move to Hermann Hospital and was involved with the startup of their Life Flight program. A great, great thrill in my life and something that it changed the trajectory of my life. I've been interviewing people as an executive recruiter for more than 27 years. Heck, it's probably more than 30 now. And somebody says, "What have you been doing?" I said, "I've been doing the two T's and a W. Teaching, talking, and writing about interviewing for about 30 years. I've interviewed thousands of people throughout the globe. And so I know what a good interview sounds like. And I absolutely have sat through some good ones and a lot of bad ones. And people don't realize that one of the problems this is a unique form of communication, and it's not something people do every day. And so they kind of go through the job description and look over their resume and kind of think about some of the things they've done. And then they show up and answer questions. And this is really, you're missing a great opportunity. So today we're going to spend some time and talk about the art of the interview. This is a two-part program. Next week, we'll have part two. Part two. And then and we'll get into some more of the interview strategies, the types of interviews, how you prepare for those interviews. But today, we are setting the stage. So let's get busy. Job interviewing, this quote is something I've said many, many times in presentations. And I was talking about the changes that were occurring 6, 7, 8 years ago. The last 3 to 5 years, they have been fairly significant. Today, it is much more. It must be much more than just answering questions. And we'll talk about that today. And we're glad that you're with us. I love this quote from Ted Lasso, season 1 of that great Apple series. I have a real tricky time hearing folks that don't believe in themselves. And I will tell you that this is absolutely a true statement. And when you interview someone and they're really not sure of their value, if they're not prepared, their message invariably will be muddled. Now, a lot of people think, well, I'm really great in my job. I've been very successful in my career. I'll go in and they'll see that I'm the best person for the job. Well, that doesn't happen very often. Matter of fact, the best person for the job only gets it about 35% of the time. And sometimes a really bad, stinking, lousy choice gets the job, or the office politics gets the job. And I did a lot of work in very, very challenging healthcare environments. And I have seen recruiters from other firms bring in CEOs that were they looked good on paper, and they didn't really vet them very carefully, or they went through a process and they were good enough to conceal their real weaknesses, and then end up destroying organizations. Legendary not-for-profit facilities that are today owned by for-profit organizations because they had to be bailed out. And I tell you that's really tragic. A bad CEO, one that did not communicate their value and still was hired, can do incredible damage to people's careers and their livelihood. So let's talk about the foundation for success. Now, these elements are really, really critical. First of all, if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't have the confidence in yourself, you are screwed. Let me tell you why. Because that confidence allows you to be more self-aware. It allows you to really hear the questions and be able to really communicate your value. You have to excel today in telling your story, not just answering questions. Lead interviewers. You must lead interviewers to see what you are saying. I love this quote. When I was selling helicopters to hospitals in the 70s, I was 26 years old. My hair was down over my ears. I was wearing these mod style, off the rack department store cheap suits because that's all I could afford at the time. But they're flying me around the country first class. And I'm talking to these very senior, older guys that are legendary healthcare executives to say, put a helicopter on your roof and we'll show you how that can turn your organization around and make a lot of money. And everybody said, wow. Were you a trained salesman? And I said, no. Well, you must have been an expert on helicopters. I said, no. Well, you must really have been able to communicate the value of the hospitals. I said, at that point in my career, I recognized a hospital 3 out of 5 times. Why was I successful? Because I was enthusiastic. I was confident that I knew what I was talking about because I'd done one at Herman Hospital. I'd set it up from soup to nuts with a great team helping me along the way and keeping me out of trouble. Those are some of the greatest people in the world, and some of them have now passed on, but they were incredible people who, really helped me be successful. But I was enthusiastic. I was confident that I knew how to do it, and I was enthusiastic. Enthusiasm is an infectious energy, and people will kind of flock to the enthusiastic leader. You can't be enthusiastic without a lot of stuff to back it up. But if you know your stuff, if you know how to do a program and you're enthusiastic in your sales, you will be successful. And I was. Over a 2.5-year period, I helped set up the next 13 or 14 programs nationally. All but one of those programs is still operating today. Now let's talk about the building blocks for success. Great interviews don't just happen. Success is the result of extensive preparation. Now, again, you will hear me say this off and on through the next this session today and next week. Don't just show up and answer questions. Explain your why and add the value. For example, tell me about your parents. Who were they? The person that really added value to your life and got you started in the right direction? And people will say, yes, they were. They were great people. End of answer. They answered the question. But this is the chance where you can plug in your value statement to talk about my parents opened doors for me. They supported me. They were so instrumental in helping me understand the importance of integrity, of hard work, and of loyalty. Now, that's a lot better answer than just you added value to it. You explained the why, not just, yes, it was my parents that helped me just get started and taught me well. You explained more. You connected with the people. Now, the other thing that confidence will do and being prepared will do, may help you become more self-aware. When you're nervous and you're thinking about the next question you're going to be asked, you're not paying attention. You have to smile, you have to engage, and you have to explain, and you have to reassure. Be focused and stay on point. Now, I've interviewed some great operating people, and sometimes chief operating officers aren't very good CEOs because they're so much into the weeds and the detail, and a CEO's got to be bigger picture. But when you're interviewing an operating officer, a lot of times they will give you a big, bold answer that has all the elements tied up in a nice ribbon. The problem is that it's such a massive answer that people kind of lose their way in the process. Okay? Employers hire people they like and trust. And that like and trust element doesn't come necessarily from the length of your answers. You want to be focused. You want to stay on point, get to the point, and remember what my Canadian wife says, less is more. Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. Okay, the fact is that there's not a lot of magic to the importance of having confidence. Believe you can, and you're halfway there was a famous quote from President Theodore Roosevelt. Believe that you can, and you're halfway there. But if you come in and you're not confident, if you're not prepared, if you don't understand your value, then you will not deliver the kind of results that you will need to deliver in a highly competitive marketplace. Today, there are still graduate schools are turning out all these MBAs, and there are at the same time we have a contraction in a lot of industries that typically were the recipients of those MBAs, and so management and executive jobs are harder to find than ever before. So you can't just show up and answer questions. You can't just show up and not be prepared. Okay, so the first step is you got to create your value brand statement. And if you're a member of the Guiding Your Career community, you know that this is part of our 11 or 12 part course offering. And you have unlimited access to this and other courses. And it only costs you $49 a month. But it's very important. If you do not understand your value, and you don't have a specific value brand statement written out and where you know it in your heart, you are missing the boat. I'm absolutely tell you, some people call it a value proposition. That may help you connect with what I'm talking about. But I can tell you within 2 or 3 minutes when I start interviewing an applicant, whether they are focused and whether they understand their value. How can you sell yourself? How can you tell the community, the potential employer that you can do the job if you can't connect the dots, if you can't communicate your value and how you're going to use that value to solve his or her problems? So create a value brand statement. This is part of our coursework. This is not really complicated stuff, but this is not just a box you check off. This requires some really serious thought. You need to do what we call reflective thinking. You may list all of your strengths in one column and then go back and say, okay, where's the proof that that's a strength? Okay. And it may be anecdotal, it may be factual, but you can't just write down a bunch of stuff. You need to be very, very specific, and you need to narrow it down to 4 signature strengths. Because if any more, maybe five, but any more than 4 or 5, and you're not going to be focused. And if you're not focused, your answers are not going to be focused. Okay. As you go through your preparation, you will always need to select on-point examples to show your value. Now, in a few minutes, we're going to talk about how interviews and resumes have something in common, but stand by for that. The other thing I would encourage you to do is to use stories to enhance your answers. Now, we have something called a core and categorical work form, and it allows you to break each job down by the categories: HR, financial management, operational management, marketing, governance support, things like this. In every area, you have strengths and weaknesses. Write those down, and then think about stories of success, how you were successful, and then use those examples in your answer. And guess what? If you just show up to the interview to answer questions, you're probably not going to be able to produce many interesting stories. A story will be remembered more than you just spouting metrics, giving them facts and figures. People remember stories. That is what connects you to the interviewer. Trust and likability and trust are 2 major reasons why employers hire qualified candidates. Now, let's talk about the average. Everybody says, well, what's the average interview like? Well, first of all, let me give you a few kind of parameters. There are only about 50 or 60 possible interview questions, okay? And one of the things I will absolutely tell you, you're crazy if you're not doing this, please do this when you start your job search, is after every interview, write down as many of the questions that you can remember as humanly possible. Why? Because you're going to hear them again and again and again. So start making a record of that. Don't act like when you get this, tell me about yourself, it's the first time you've ever heard the flipping answer. People do that all the time. If you're looking for one way to differentiate yourself and elevate your brand, your performance above your competitors, and there will be a lot of competitors, is that you're prepared and you can communicate your value, and that you have great stories, and that you connect with the interviewer. Okay, so keep a journal of all your questions that you've been asked. Now, most interviews, this is, I know, surprising to some people, include 5 to 6 behavioral health. You've got to be crazy to be a recruiter. Most have 5 to 6 behavioral questions and 2 to 3 categorical questions. So the categorical questions are, well, tell me about how many days of cash on hand did you have? Tell me what your turnover rate. Those are categorical questions. The core questions are, tell me about a time when you solved a problem. Now, there are people out there that think that the worst thing that ever happened in this life was behavioral interviews. And I would say that's their bloody opinion. And I've heard one that last week was pretty arrogant about it. But I will tell you, in 27 years of doing CEO searches using a detailed behavior and values questionnaire that we developed based on Brad Smart's top grading plan, we batted 1,000% on CEO searches. Now, I've certainly had my challenges with some vice presidents and CFOs and CNOs and chief marketing officers and chief medical officers. But in 27 years, I still only had to do 12 replacement searches. So I was pretty proud of that record. And the reason we were so successful is because we used a behavior and values question and we dug in. So it was not uncommon if you interviewed with me to have 30 to 40 to 50 questions in a 2 to 3 hour period. But the average interview, it's all about process. So they have 5 to 6 behavioral and 2 to 3 categorical questions in about an hour interview. Now, no two jobs or job interviews are alike. Okay. The old thing is just like your resume. You cannot submit a generic resume to an employer for a specific job because this computer is going to kick it out. Well, when you're sitting there interviewing, if you've worked your tail off to get to the table, and you're going to just give generic answers and you haven't really thought about anything, and you're not giving examples and sharing value statements that relate to the problems they're having, you're probably not going to get selected. And if you do, it's clear that the employer doesn't know what the hell it is they're doing. So be prepared. Don't get eliminated because you may be the perfect candidate, but don't allow yourself to be eliminated because you went in with generic responses. You've got to customize your interview preparation just like you customize your resume. It's really, really essential. Okay, now for every job you pursue, again, customize your answers. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you know that they're having significant cash flow problems, then you want to have great examples of how you improve cash flow, how you were able to sustain that, how you were able to lead performance improvement initiatives that strengthen the overall financial picture. That's what I mean by that. And you can't just sit there and bring it up on your mind. You need to prepare in advance. And be very, very thoughtful about this, because when you're prepared in advance, when you're confident, you're going to be really, really self-aware doing the interview, and that's going to make the difference between being successful and not being successful. Okay? Always prepare for each interview. Break down the position by category. As I said, select appropriate examples, metrics for each category for a specific job, or touching stories, maybe about how you were selected for a job or what people said about your performance. Now, the next thing you need to do in an interview is sometimes you'll go in and you'll be there for 2 days and you'll have 2 or 3 panel interviews. It is not inappropriate to ask your contact in their company or the recruiter to give you a schedule of the people of your interviews and the people you'll be interviewing with. Why? Because that allows you to do your homework. You look them up if you're in the American College of Healthcare Executives or in a marketing organization or manufacturing, there are industry directories, and a lot of those directories will give you, their where they've worked and their contact information, where they went to school, all of this stuff. If you don't have that, you can use LinkedIn, but you want to know who you're talking to. Know your audience. Are these going to be direct reports? Are they going to be peers? Are they going to be superiors, maybe board members and stakeholders? You need to know who you're talking to because that will determine your messaging. So do your homework. Okay. Now, again, request the list. Most people they're so happy that they've been invited to do an on-site interview that they don't want to ask stuff because they're afraid, well, that might upset them. Well, they're asking you to move across town or across the country. Give me a break. That's not, I can't, I have trouble with that. And if they say, well, we just can't do that, then that's, you got to be concerned. You got to be concerned that what's the culture of this organization if they can't even provide me a list of the people I'm going to be interviewing with. That is so critical to you not making a hiring choice mistake. So find out who you're going to be talking to and do your research, do your homework, so that if you may see somebody that went to school with a friend of yours, they were at a small school at the same time. I mean, that's just a far-fetched example. But when you see that, you might say, oh, I had a friend that was at school there at the same time you were. Do you know so-and-so? Okay. Now that you're giving him a secondary reference, because anytime you mention a name in an interview, it's subjected to reference checks. But you might have fraternity brothers or sorority sisters, or you might know people that you've worked with in the past. Do your homework. I have seen people go into interviews and miss 5 or 6 opportunities to make a real connection with the employer because they hadn't done their homework. So study the job summary and get as much additional information from the employer as possible. Look for issues and questions, but don't get bogged down in the details. You are not being brought in there to be the operations expert on all of their challenges. And there's some people that are the best operators in the world. They are so clever and so bright and so, they're 100% in getting the job done. But sometimes they get too bogged down in the details and they miss their message. And so if you're not thinking about how do I help them rather than understanding the problem, it's a subtle change there. That, you got to understand what the problem is, but you don't have to be an expert on it. And when they start talking about issues, you want to talk about, yes, I've had experience in doing that in these hospitals and we were very successful. Then add some value to your answer. Based on one of my signature strengths is that I'm very, very good at meeting deadlines and paying attention to details. And I'm a strong self-starter. Those all 3 are essential core elements if we're going to fix this problem. Okay, so I have now said my 3 strengths are going to help you solve your problem. If you go into an interview and you don't get into that, you don't make that connection, you're going to lose out. I can't tell you how I wish I had a buck for every time I could have said, well, they should have figured it out. No, they shouldn't. If you allow the employer to do the math, they're going to get the wrong answer. You have to do it for them. That's what I mean by not just showing up and answering questions. That's a fool's errand. Now, be confident, do your homework, use your homework to bolster your preparation, engage, be focused, be self-aware, build trust. That's so important, build trust. And I would tell you so much that when you build that trust, you improve your chances to move up in the search. But you have to prepare. Now, I know a lot of people who don't like the idea of standing in front of a mirror and rehearsing their answers. But you know what? The people who do are a lot better off in the interview process. Why? Because rehearsing will build confidence. Confidence will build self-awareness, and self-awareness will enhance your ability to take advantage of the little things. When you see an opportunity, or you may see, some body language, or you may see somebody kind of go, oh, they mention a problem they're having, and sometimes other people on the interview team will squint, kind of go like somebody just stepped on a sore tail, cat. I mean, people will transmit things in an interview. You have to be self-aware, and you have to be self-aware so that you're not in there just your brain going crazy trying to keep up with the answers. If you've done the preparation, you pretty much know what they're going to ask you. Okay. And it's not, it's not like you got to go in and know the answer to 150 questions. You're going to get 5, 6, maybe 10 or 12 at the most in an hour interview. So if you're prepared, we're going to talk about preparation next week and how to do that, but you can anticipate what you're being asked. And when you go in, they may not ask you questions. One of the things we do is we say, look, think about if you were doing the interview What questions would you ask? And a friend that I coached several years ago, one of the really bright physician assistants in the country, great cardiac PA, who's now wrapping up her master's degree and is working for an incredible company and playing a really key role. She said, they only asked me maybe one or two questions. I spent all this time preparing, but then I realized I was so confident, and because I was so confident, I did not struggle coming up with the answers. Even though they didn't ask specific questions that I kind of thought they might, that preparation helped me ace the interview. And the person who hired me for the job even said, we hired you because you were prepared, you were confident, and your answers were great. They communicated your value. Communicate your value. It's not just your skills, it's your overall value. So I'm gonna change this over now, and if anybody has any comments or questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll pick them up. Okay. What do you mean by anticipating questions? Well, using the core and categorical format, once you break down the job and you kind of know where the dicey points are, you'll know that they may be asking questions around those focal points, and you can start thinking, okay, well, what questions will they ask that are the most obvious that would lead them to quickly understand that I have the skill set? Think about answers for those things. You're also going to get questions like, tell me about your leadership style. Please, please, please don't give your leadership philosophy. They say style, talk about how you actually execute. If they talk about philosophy, talk about your concepts and use your value brand statement. Okay. And so you can anticipate questions, and when you anticipate the questions, you can have answers. Now, do not memorize answers, and don't come in there like this pre-programmed robot, because you won't get the job either. You can over-prepare just like you can under-prepare. Most people under-prepare. So what I want you to do next time is prepare just right. Okay. We'll be talking about that next time. What is the most difficult interview to prepare for? I think the first one, the telephone interview, that telephone screening interview, it's about 30 minutes. If you're prone to give long answers, you're in trouble. But the problem is you can't see the person. So here's a tip. In order to help you connect with that individual, they say, let me just pause. They say some of the best radio announcers in the world during the heydays of rock and roll radio in the United States, they were really good because they sounded like they were talking to you, even though they were talking to thousands and thousands of listeners. Okay. So you kind of have to do that with the telephone interview. One thing you can do is, when you find out who is going to be doing the telephone interview, go to their LinkedIn profile, print their picture, and talk to that picture. Okay. That'll help you make a connection there. What's the biggest mistake you've ever seen in a job interview? Guy, the list is long and distinguished. I have seen people come in and absolutely be on the cusp of a massive emotional problem in their family, and just all the way through the interview, I kept thinking this person's going to break down and cry. And I've had people who had been fired and got back into the market too quick break down and cry because they had been treated so badly, and that had never happened to them before. So one of the things that you do not want to get to the market, unless you're just desperate for money, do not go back into the market until you go through the process of grief of if you've been fired or terminated from a long-time employment. Don't go to the market until you're ready. Okay, that's another thing we will talk about. But I've seen people say incredibly stupid things. I have seen people say incredibly clever things, and sometimes the clever thing is just a bridge quote. I asked an applicant why what his weaknesses were, and he laughed. He said, maybe we should call my wife. And when I was recording the interview for the board to see, and they all laughed, and they said, yeah, we like this guy. Okay. And he really turned the tide with that one simple bridge answer. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about our career community, because we're going to be doing teaching courses on a weekly basis. In the morning, we have a program called Career Live. It's 30 minutes, and we'll be talking about the importance of career management in the morning. Next week, we will be doing part 2 of this program. And this will be, that will be a members only presentation. So if you would like to get more of this kind of information, we encourage you to become a member. There's no contract. It's month to month. It's $1.63 a day. And if you sign up today, you will become a founding member. And if you want to stay with us, and use this as a networking platform, as a career education platform, as a guiding for people that'll stand with you and give you advice as you go through and have to make key career decisions, you can do that. We will not, if you're a founding member, your membership will always be $49 a month, $1.63 a day. When we reach a certain point, and it's, I think, around 200 members, we will be moving the fee up to $59. And again, there's no contract. You pay monthly. It comes out of your credit card automatically, and you can sign up by going to johngself.com, and there's a little button on the side of the homepage. Click that red button. We'll be showing you a slide in just a minute, and and go through the process. Look over the courses. I think we have 11 or 12 courses that cover all aspects of a job search, and we're adding more all the time. We're also, we post 2 to 3 times a week videos talking about career issues. And we have once a month, we have something, twice a month, we have Lunch and Learn, which is a career talk at noon or 11:30 on the first and third Tuesdays of the month. Every Thursday morning, we have Career Live. Every Wednesday afternoon, we have Your Career Community. Your Career Community and Lunch and Learn are members only events. So you can, and we're going to be also, we have something called Self Perspective. It's based on an old blog I had several years ago, where we're interviewing key decision makers, people who have a lot of experience in the career management field, or who have expertise in other areas. Last week, we talked to Mike Lieb. Mike Lieb is an executive on demand, and he talked about how he got into that business and how he built his business and how he uses networking to keep very, very active and keep jobs piling up so that he doesn't have a lot of downtime, which is a problem for a lot of people. And Mike is a great manager of his brand. That video is available at my YouTube page, Guiding Your Career, John G. Self, under the live tab. So you can go back and listen to it. Also, in that tab is the first interview we did with T.D. Smyers, an incredible executive coach, a former captain in the United States Navy, who was at one of the best all-around not-for-profit CEOs after he left his command position and retired from the Navy. He was voted in Fort Worth as being one of the top not-for-profit executives around. He is a fascinating guy. His interview is also available. And we have 2 or 3 more we've got in production right now. So we want you to become a member. We want to build this up. A lot of places you can use LinkedIn to find people to connect with, but this is a site that we want to build. Right now, it's very small. There are 50 of us. We want to build this site up so that it's vibrant, that it's ethical, and that you're not going to get bombarded with sales presentations. We will try to provide career education, but you pay your monthly fees unless you need additional help. And then as a member, if you do need additional help, you get that at a significant discount. So if you hired me to do a coaching session, it would probably be, I think, $175 an hour, because I'd be prepped for it. To do a mock interview, probably $175 an hour. If you're a member of Guiding Your Career, I think it's $89 for that additional intensive training. But all of this stuff, you can always ask us questions. We don't every time you call and ask a question, we're not turning on the meter. That's $49 a month, and there will be a done for you process. So for people who don't have the time to market, do their brand management, we'll be looking at putting something together there. We are working, and hopefully soon, to have a video up of how to use video, how to edit video to bolster your brand. So I hope this has been helpful today. I hope you'll come back and see us next week here on Office Hours, and we'll have part 2, and we'll get into the really nitty-gritty of the type of interviews that you can experience and how you can go about preparing for that, so you can really differentiate yourself in the job search process.